Hello there and welcome to CodeRage 10. This is the InterBase XE7 product address. InterBase obviously is the home of change views, which we're going to be having a look at as we go through, along with some great stories and a few bits around the edges too. So my name is Stephen Ball. I am the Associate Product Manager here at Embarcadero for InterBase. If you'd like to contact me, then please either use the chat window if you're watching this live. If you're watching it on recording or on demand, then feel free to drop me an email or send me a tweet at DelphiaBall, or my email stephen.ball@embarcadero.com. Now, as we go through, there are some additional resources up on my blog, which is on the screen there, and specific lessons taking you through change views and notes about the different updates for InterBase. So if you do want to find more around the product, then obviously first try the InterBase homepage and equally have a look at my blog. So the session today, we're going to have a quick overview of what InterBase is, some stories of where users are using it, which gives you a good idea of the capabilities of the product. We're going to have a look around what came in with the XE7 release back in December, and there have been some updates since then, so we'll cover a few of those bits through. We'll also cover some of the features that we're working at on the roadmap, and if you'd like to get involved as a beta tester, then feel free to reach out to me and we can get that sorted through. And we'll also talk a little bit about the VAR program, and the VAR program is an important way that we can help you as developers get your products to market in a very cost-effective and practical way that licenses according to your business models as well. So InterBase really does help you kickstart your applications with must-have data security, synchronization, and disaster recovery features. And all of this is built into a database that you can embed, deploy, and relax about. Now, when we say embed, we term InterBase as an embeddable database. What that means is that it can be silently installed with your system. You don't need to install it separately and then have a DBA spend a whole load of time setting it up and configuring it. It installs as part of your product, either as a standalone install or silently underneath the hood as part of the installer. But also we have a deeply embeddable version which you can use as a driver for talking back to a server, or you can run as an embedded database engine for your application to have its own unique to it connection to a database that's not a shared database but is a standalone database, and that's something that the deeply embedded versions provide. So because InterBase is an embeddable and deeply embeddable database, we're able to provide InterBase out to you on many platforms. We're not only able to cover the server side, where you can have clients connecting in. We provide Windows and Linux server versions, both 32 and 64-bit. But we're also able to provide a deeply embeddable database that runs out on Windows, on Mac, on iOS and Android. That's with the To-Go and IB Lite versions of InterBase. That's pretty well fully featured, and also can be used as a client to connect back to a remote server. So not only can you do local data storage, you can also connect to data across the network directly from one of those devices. So I want to share some stories with you, and the first one is one that I really love. This is Spinali Design. It's a French company who have created the connected bikini, and they also do a connected towel, which there's a chip that you can move between your bikini and your towel. It tracks how long you've been in the sun. It reads the UV rays to work out the power of the sun, and then alerts you when it's time to top up your sun cream. And they also have a Valentine's Day version which alerts your partner that it's time to come and top up your sun cream. So some quite fun stuff really. But on a serious note, this data is being tracked out into an InterBase database on the device and is being used locally to be able to make a decision about when you need to update your sun cream. And that's all powered through Delphi and IB Lite. So another one of the great stories is with Management Plus. Now these guys are based out of Salt Lake City and are one of the leading suppliers of electronic health record systems, specifically for dealing with eyes and eye care. And they have a broad customer base with a number of kind of small shops, all the way through to big clinics. And InterBase really helps them because obviously with electronic health records, you need to be properly securely stored. And with 256-bit AES encryption, they're able to meet the standards and the requirements that they need for the storage, the safe storage of electronic health records at rest. And they've been working not only through their traditional client-server projects, but also they're now able to take their current data model, the data layer, with all the testing that they've done on the data and the data at rest, and they're able to start expanding that very, very simply across to mobile, which gives them a huge competitive advantage because they're already using something that's tried and tested and are able to actually then apply that out onto mobile space as well, which has a whole load of different challenges. So if you're interested about the challenges around mobilization, obviously security is just one of them, then definitely have a look on the InterBase homepage. There's some articles and video replays on the right hand side. We did a great session of mobilizing data and the key things to look out for around data security there, so definitely worth having a check through there. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about Management Plus is that they have a reasonably small development team, and they're a very capable team, but then their time is very, very valuable. And they don't want to be spending all their time ending up as, the back-end support. And they don't want to have cost of a full-time DBA. And that's one of the things that InterBase really has empowered them around with their business, which has been, one of the driving factors around why it's been so cost-effective for them and affordable to use InterBase. Because once it's embedded, they're able just to deploy it and get on with their next project, rather than having to kind of manage 24/7 the whole database server and systems that are out there. Another example is BiNuclear. These guys are based in Puerto Rico, and they're kind of another part of the medical industry. They're doing a lot of lab work. In fact, sound very similar to a company that I visited recently, another InterBase customer in the Netherlands, who are one of the industry leaders for kind of dealing with all the Petri dishes and growing stuff in the labs and monitoring everything on that side of things, trying to match the drugs together to the patient. With BiNuclear, again, very similar to Management Plus, small development team, need to make sure that the stuff works. They also need to make sure that it works because they haven't got direct connections to a lot of the sites. So very important that they can leave it there and trust it's just going to keep running, especially when it's very difficult to actually get onto some of the sites they have spotted around the country. And again, with both of these companies, it's very important in medical that you don't lose data. It costs a lot of money to do blood tests and to run these tests and to collect the data that you need to be able to analyze, to work out what you need to do with a patient. And key features like journaling help make this a reality and make sure that even at the worst of times they're not losing data. Bonev is another great story. This is one of the leading financial applications in Bulgaria. They have over 5,000 customers across the country, ranging from people with just them and their laptop through to customer bases that are hundreds of people connecting into the same database. And they do a lot of financial reporting through to the tax authorities. They're doing a lot of supply chain management. They're used by people like Overgas Holdings, Armet, Cargill, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and also they've had their applications certified for use with the Bulgarian military for some of the work that they're doing. And if we can get the software running on their networks and things are okay, then we know that InterBase is a strong start point. And with Bonnev, Valentin looked at a number of different databases, and InterBase had the right mix of ease of use, speed, great performance, obviously strong security, which is required to work with some of those customers, support behind it as well, and also the scalability that matched in deploying out to their very mixed customer base, but still allowing them to do that in a price model that worked exceptionally well for both them and their partners. So yes, InterBase is an embeddable database, but it really doesn't lack on features. It is very scalable, very, very powerful, very simple to deploy, has full built-in encryption on the paid versions, great self-tuning engine. It includes some exceptionally powerful features. Some we'll talk a little bit more about in this, and also the following on session to this at CodeRage, which is around change views. We've had 15 years now of multi-processor support, which I know from talking to people who have been moving back to InterBase, the speed and performance of InterBase really blew them away when they were running their existing databases back onto InterBase. And over here on the right, key things like disaster recovery, point-in-time recovery, point-in-time recovery allowing you to literally go back to a previous point in time and get the database as it was at that point, if you so need to, is a very important feature when it comes to tracking and dealing with data. Now, one of the other things that we're very proud of with InterBase is that it not only works with C++ Builder and Delphi and the Rad Studio products, but we have a huge number of customers using it with PHP, with Eclipse, with Xcode, with Visual Studio. In fact, one of our biggest customers is a Visual Studio customer. So let's have a look at what's new around InterBase. Key thing is really, with XE7, it's about running faster, running longer, and allowing you to code a lot smarter. So very, very quickly, XE, we introduced dynamic SQL in stored procedures. There were some great improvements in terms of large object handling, which really sped up the database, moving blobs out of the way unless they were actually really needed. Some improved security, much stronger crypto hashing, much faster database sweep. We have one customer who is doing tens of thousands of transactions an hour, and the database sweep for them, on the traditional model, took about a minute to run. With the fast database sweep, it's done within a second. So some incredible speed performance around the database sweep, and much larger database support. XE3, we introduced the single cross-platform database structure. That meant you can literally move your database file between multiple different platforms without having to back it up and restore it. And we also introduced iOS and Android, and the free IB Lite edition had the 64-bit ODBC drivers introduced, and some updates for the JDBC. The 64-bit ODBC driver. Moving on to XE7, which is the current release. Obviously, Linux 64-bit is brand new for us, and a big part of that also is we now have support for Ubuntu and the latest SUSE and Red Hat Enterprise. So, Linux 64-bit is brand new, which is great. Gives you the power of 64-bit now on Linux, which is a much cheaper server platform to run if you want to go and do so. Also, with the ability to run longer, we had some customers who were doing tens of thousands of transactions an hour, and they're getting to the point after about a month that they had to schedule maintenance to back up and restore the database. Well, now with XE7, we've changed from a 32-bit to a 64-bit transaction ID, and this is allowing us to run even at 10,000 transactions a second, you'd be running for 150 years before we'd run out of transaction IDs. For most customers, this would never be a problem, and I certainly am not going to be around in 150 years' time if somebody doesn't need to back up and restore a database. But I think they may end up doing that before that point anyway, so that's a pretty good time span for that. Change views, which I'll mention briefly in a moment but they are a brand new patent pending way of tracking data and being able to pick up specifically what's changed just for you. There's a whole load of speed and performance updates under the hood. We've got some improvements around the backup and disaster recovery. So we now have an incremental backup as well, which allows you to back up the database, but then when you've done the backup, when you tell it to back up again, you can tell it to only back up and it will find what's changed and then update the backup, so it's a lot quicker rather than rebacking up the entire database. So incremental backups are a very, very powerful feature. Reduce CPU use and process, server load, and keep your backups up to date a lot quicker, so you can run them a lot more regularly as well. There's some new developer APIs for the journaling, in fact, which I've got listed at the bottom as well. We also now have a new ODS on-disk structure, which allows us to take, it introduces kind of the new things around change views and the incremental backups and so on. We support with XE7 ODS 13 and above. Easiest way to get onto the new ODS and get the new features is to back up and restore the database, and off you get ready to go. But we've also introduced for developers the ability to keep current. You can stay on the latest version of InterBase, and even if your customers are on older versions, you can take advantage of the power in the newer version to do the work that you need to do, and then you can back up your database to an older version when you restore it back out, ready to put back onto your customer's site if you need to. Now, change views. Change views, I'm not going to talk a lot about in here because we have a whole session running through them. I will draw your eye to the URL on the screen. Definitely worth making a note of that right now. That's changeviewswp. That's the embt.co/changeviewswp, capital C, V, and WP. The change views white paper really goes in depth about the differences between change views, replication technologies, using triggers and date fields, and how it's very, very different. And I say, change views is dramatically reducing the amount of data traffic that needs to be made. It's opening doors for people who are wanting to put scalability into the data movement. I'll give you one example. We've been working with a pharmacy chain who have 30,000 pharmacies, and they currently moving a few terabytes of data a week across their network to update in its entirety a SQL Server database that has the medicine information in it, which is required by the pharmacists when they're printing out the labels for the bottles and doing everything else like that on site. And using change views, we're actually allowing them to put a copy of InterBase next to the SQL Server database, and then centrally doing a record-by-record comparison, which is updating the InterBase database with the data that's in the SQL Server one. In fact, I spoke about this at DataU just a couple of weeks ago, and we did the first mapping with ER Studio, and then they just run this tool to pick up the changes, update the InterBase database, and then the 30,000 pharmacies are allowed to connect into the InterBase database, identify themselves, and then the InterBase database will know what's specifically changed in the data at a field level for them. So rather than pushing hundreds of megs per site around, they're pushing a few meg at the most per site. And that's allowed them to dramatically reduce the cost of their data movement and start being able to, in essence, replicate data in a way that traditional replication technologies just won't scale to. And all of this is done with no log tables, no additional fields set up in the database, at field level granularity, no timestamps to worry about, no time zones, no locking of tables. It's just very scalable and works. So if you want to find out more about change views, join the session that we've got running after this one on change views specifically, or again, check out my blog and pick up the links there and come find out more about change views. Now this is a Delphi example of actually updating the database once you're using change views, and that literally is 3 different tables there with 3 local queries, 3 remote queries which are picking up the deltas, which are running the same SQL statement in them, and then just merging the data set with a single call to a FIDAC component and then apply updates, and that's dealing with the inserts, updates and deletes at field level for you. Now, I mentioned briefly about disaster recovery earlier, and journaling. Disaster recovery is very, very important. When it comes to what's the worst that can happen, well, 60% of companies that lose their data will shut down within 6 months of the disaster. 31% of PC users have lost all of their files due to events beyond their control. Companies that lost their data center for 10 days or more due to a disaster. Half of them filed for bankruptcy. 93% of them filed for bankruptcy within 1 year of the disaster. It's important to be able to get your data back up and running. And interestingly, 34% of companies fail to test their tape backups. And of those that do, 77% of those have found that the tape backups have got failures on them. 6% of all PCs will suffer from an episode of data loss in any given year. So what this means is it's pretty important to be able to test your backup, to be able to make sure your backups are working, to be able to get your data onto another machine, to be able to move your data as you need to. If your server goes down and you've got 30,000 pharmacies that need to be able to kept up to date, you sure want to make sure that they've got the data down there already. So yes, there's a lot of movement to the cloud. It is important to be able to have data at rest, securely managed in different scenarios to allow the business to keep running, and also to be able to, if something does happen, that you can get that data back up and going very quickly. Now, in terms of the disaster recovery levels, obviously doing nothing is going to take you a while to get back up and running. If you've got a standard backup that's running, or if you're using the incremental backup, then you're as good as the last backup that you made. Now, typically people run those overnight, so you might be talking 24 hours that you lose at the most. However, if you really want to get down to not losing data, again, things like journaling, which again is one of the key reasons where InterBase is very popular globally with medical, and point-in-time recovery really do enable you to take your data recovery to the next level. And using the journals and having the journal files that log out really does mean that even if the server goes down and it has to reboot back up, you're able to apply those journals to your recent backup to bring you back up to the point that you were when the server went down. So that makes a huge difference to making sure you don't lose data. Now, the incremental backup's very, very easy to use. Just from IVConsole, go to backup and store incremental backup. There's also a command line for it, which is gback -dump, then the source database and the destination backup file. And you can tell it if you want to overwrite the database or if you want it to provide just the incremental elements down to that dump. So that's a fair bit about InterBase. Just about the roadmap now. So we've delivered pretty much everything we were going to deliver and promised to deliver last year. We've been working hard on making sure that new features have got the extra oomph around the edges as we've been going through with XE7. We've delivered 4 updates with things that people are coming back. We're very responsive in making sure that if problems are found, we know these are your systems that are running on them. And although the certification process takes a few days to go through, we have that number of unit tests running. We've managed to deliver a few updates now to customers to make sure everybody keeps moving very smoothly. Now, on our roadmap, we're also now working and looking at delivering derived tables. We're looking at evaluating common table expressions. We're looking at code functions. So specifically for the embedded versions, these will allow you to have functionality similar to user-defined functions, where you can call back to your actual main application and have some code run there that you then return a value back to the database. We're also looking at faster on-disk expansion, which will help with customers who are wanting to log huge amounts of data exceptionally quickly to disk. InterBase is pretty good at this already, but we're looking to make that even faster. And we're also looking at additional enhancements around change views, indexing, and also our driver supports for ADPC, JDPC, and so on. Now, very quickly, InterBase is available through the shop. It's also available directly through your sales reps. Our list pricing for InterBase starts from around about just under $13 a license, and for the embedded versions, we have a VAR program load that we do highly recommend. If you're deploying InterBase a lot with your products to a range of different customers, then talk to us directly, and we can really help you through the pricing there. If you're interested in becoming a VAR, then we have an SDK Pack, which is the first step really on that road. We have a very, very simple, no-nonsense VAR agreement. We'd like to keep things simple for you and for us. And we also have an online portal that you can see your usage through. It's a very low-risk sign-up process. Basically, the way it works, once you've got your SDK Pack, and that allows us to then start talking with you around the commercials, making sure that we can make a model that fits for both you and for us. But also the SDK Pack allows you to do the testing with your installation and your development team, and train your sales team on how to use the products. And then once everything's completed, we then give you your live keys, which you just swap out with your SDK one. The SDK Pack includes full 256-bit AES encryption, which is the level above what's available on the Developer Edition. We also include licenses that will run for spanning a year. You get basically license keys that are valid for 60 days at a time, and they can be quietly installed and tested with for InterBase Server, Desktop, and the To-Go edition. So in summary, InterBase really is around. It's part of the Internet of Things. We've seen the great story with Spinali Design with their connected bikini. We've had a look at some of the great stuff that's going on around medical with the connectivity around there. InterBase is also very big in POS systems globally. And a big part of this is because it's the small footprint. You can just embed, deploy, relax. It runs across all the platforms that you need to reach today and tomorrow. It has a very low cost of ownership because of the zero administration, the automatic crash recovery, the capabilities around journaling as part of that, to ensure you don't lose any data. The great encryption support. And as I say, it is a very low cost database engine to run, not only in the upfront cost, but in terms of what it costs you to support it, maintain it, and to have the systems run with it on. I'd highly recommend going and having a look at the product pages for InterBase. There's additional webinars and links to white papers and bits up there. There's also some great documentation on docwiki.embarcadero.com, which is where all our InterBase documentation is moving to. The old style docs are still available at docs.embarcadero.com/products/InterBase. Also, up on the InterBase page, you'll be able to find the link to the videos, or there's the direct link at the bottom, which is the InterBase-Labs URL. And there's a set of different videos taking you through using domains and all the kind of cool features that InterBase has built into it. So now really it's time for Q&A.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephen, for that session.
Hey, you're welcome, Jim.
Looks like you've been in here answering some questions already, but we'll go ahead and go through these and go through the rest of them that we have here. So Alf's asking, says, when updating RAD Studio and there's a bundled new version of InterBase, do I need to uninstall the old version, or what's the best course of action?
Okay, so it really is down to you, Al. Typically, InterBase installs on port 3050, but what you can do is you can run multiple instances of InterBase on the same machine. So you can run different versions. You could have an XE, XE3, and an XE7 version of InterBase running side by side, and they'll just run as different instances. So you can then connect to a different instance. But it really is up to you. We have no problems about having multiple versions on the same machine. Obviously, you just need to change your connection string to point to the different instance.
Okay. Is there a performance change if you use SQL embedded with C++ Builder compared to FireDAC components?
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused by the question, but FireDAC are the database components that you use in Delphi or C++ to be able to talk to InterBase. You can use FireDAC or you can use IBX, Interbase Express components. They're very similar. IBX has been very, very fast for a long time talking to InterBase because it uses all the native layer. FireDAC is in the same layer, and FireDAC's got some really cool things around fetching blobs on demand, and it goes kind of beyond what IBX does as a component set. There's either of them are a great choice for working with InterBase. But in terms of the only other part of it could be is about the embedded version and the deeply embedded version. So the embedded version would be the server edition. A deeply embedded would be something like To Go or IB Lite that actually runs in the same memory space. Now, in theory, that would be slightly faster if it's just a single user application because you haven't got all the transport going through and it's running in the same memory space as your application. So from that point, it should, in theory, be slightly quicker. But yeah. If there's something different that you're meaning around that question, then please go ahead and just kind of send us another message through with some clarification.
So does incremental database backup provide a real-time copy of the database?
Yeah, so if you think, say you've got 1 million records in your database, and you might have a load of those kind of log transactions that happened in the past. You're never going back to them and changing them again. When you create a backup of the database, and at the point you start the backup, it goes into snapshot transaction mode. So anything that changes after the backup starts isn't going to be included in that backup because it then gives you a stable version of the database at that point in time. So the stable version of the backup, the database is backed up to a file. And then when you come along and do the incremental backup on top of the existing database backup that you've done, it will then look at what's changed after it did the last backup, and it will only back up the pages that have changed. So if you've only modified, say, 100 pages in the database, but you've got a million pages that are being used, rather than rebacking up 1 million records that have not changed, it's just going to update the pages that have been changed to the backup. So it's a lot faster as a backup goes, which means you can run it a lot more regularly and keep the backup up to date a lot quicker. Now, the other option, along with the incremental backup, is the data dump. Now, the data dump will actually give you a live copy of the database in read-only mode. And there's also an incremental dump as well, so you can incrementally update that database. Now, that's quite often used by people who've got a high demand on reporting, and they want to do their reporting off a separate database rather than their live database. So, they might be reporting on everything from yesterday or something, So a data dump is a really, really effective way to do that. So rather than having to restore the backup onto a different machine, you can just move that dump across to the machine that you want to run the reporting on and kill the service on that side.
Is it possible to do a select statement to get data from different databases?
I need to double check on that one. I don't think we can run a query today that allows you to do a join between one database and another. Certainly, I think you can. I think there's the ability to be able to connect to one database server that then kind of relays onto another one, but not to actually run the two together. If you do want to do that, then FireDAC, you can create a couple of different database connections, and then you can use the FireDAC components to then actually do the query across the two different database tables. And it will treat them as if it's come from the same database. So there's FireDAC components for doing that, which is really, really cool. And in fact, if you have CSV files that you're importing into InterBase, you can use the same techniques to import the CSV files into a data set and then run a local SQL against that data set compared to what's in the InterBase database and do a join against the tables and work out what's in there or not in there. So again, FireDAC really does help with that capability if you want to do that.
Does InterBase allow multiple SQL statements within one command then?
I think that comes down to the components, but certainly you can. Certainly, the easiest way to do it is just open up IVConsole, and in there you can run an insert statement and then followed by a select statement, all as part of the same query. So it's certainly possible. It depends on the actual components, what they allow. That might be the restricting area for it. Mm-hmm. So again, it depends. It depends what you want to try and do.
Is there a GUI tool for designing tables and preloading data?
Okay, so we have IVConsole. I know it's not the most advanced of GUI tools, but there are some really good capabilities in there. I think it was either last year or either the last CodeRage or the one before. Shuram, who's our lead developer for InterBase, did a really, really good session looking at performance tuning with InterBase and using the performance tuning tools within IVConsole. So those bits are in there, but using IVConsole, you can go in and you can add a field, you can define your domains and the data types and do it all through the GUI and build up your table. You can add your foreign keys, your primary keys, your unique indexes without having to write a single line of SQL. And once you're done, you can right-click and you can view the metadata and you get the whole statement there that you can copy and put into your database, into your application as a script to run to create a database on the fly. So that kind of stuff certainly can be done. The other option is to use something like ER Studio to draw out and model your data and then turn that from a physical into a logical model. That'll give you the DDL script. To preload data in IVConsole, you can go in. If you open up the table, there's some little icons in there to import and export data. So you can import from XML, from CSV, and you can then, as long as you've got header records on there, you can then map, say, right, this field into this, this field in the CSV file into this field in the database table, and import the stuff in. So you can do that through IVConsole.
So now, this is a question here, another question about ER Studio. It says, when will ER Studio have full support for InterBase?
I don't know. Certainly at the moment, you can reverse engineer InterBase using the ODBC connectivity. You can go forward, engineer, and kind of get the DDL scripts that you can then just go and run in IVConsole to generate it out. So there is some reasonable coverage at the moment, but it isn't kind of full coverage.
Is the asset backup and disaster recovery features part of InterBase or a separate product you have to buy?
Okay, so InterBase from its very beginning has been an asset compliant database. It's one of the first ever to go onto the market, really, with those kind of capabilities. And all of that is built straight in. there's nothing that is an additional chargeable add-on for InterBase. It all comes as part of what you get. So it really is down to you as a developer what you actually want to go and use. There's not kind of a pro edition and an enterprise edition like we have with Delphi. You buy InterBase Server and you get everything.
Is there a so you're saying select count 1 is very slow? Is there a faster way to get the count register?
Maybe I might try and see if we can ask that question to Shram. We're going to be redoing this in the C++ track in a few hours' time. I certainly know we did some, we're always doing optimizations around the indexing and the query side of things. There's some nice stuff around partial indexing introduced in XE7. On the count side, one of the things that used to cause a slowdown was to do with the amount of data that's being read in. And a big part of that, especially if you've got any blobs within your database, is every time you have to count a record, you need to read the pages in. And we had a separation in the architecture. So when we were doing count operations and sum and max and min, it's all those aggregate calculations, the disk I/O was reduced down tremendously for that. So that introduced a big speed up. So if you're not on XE7, then definitely download the trial edition, go and do a check against the query, and let me know how you get on. But certainly you should find it's faster to do that now than it has been in the past.
All right. Is there a maximum number of transactions per second before you can't make incremental backups and need to halt the database in order to do a backup?
Okay, so what a transaction is if I connect to the database and I start my transaction and then I run a script to update 1 million records, that's one transaction. It doesn't matter what you're doing within the transaction, it's still a single transaction. And that's why most people will never kind of hit the problems of hitting the limits on the transaction IDs, even on the 32-bit version. But certainly people who are running for months and years at a time could get close on some of the bigger throughputs. Not a problem obviously now with 64-bit transaction IDs. But in terms of connecting in, saying, right, I want to start and run something from right now, it doesn't matter how much you're running because they're all separated. That's part of the ACID compliance side of things. You get a snapshot of the database as it is at the point you connected with everything that is committed, and you're clear to go. So it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all. Excellent.
So here's another question about DBArtisan, if it's going to include performance tools for InterBase in the future.
That's a great question to ask the DBArtisan guys. Certainly, the more people who go forward to sales and saying, hey, I'd really love DBArtisan, but I need it for InterBase. I really want ER Studio, but I need fuller support on InterBase. The more those conversations that happen, the bigger chance we have of getting that stuff to market. So, one of the great things, InterBase is pretty self-sufficient. Does some great optimization under the hood already. Yep, it certainly can benefit from performance tuning. And there's a certain element that you can do today. Certainly you can use some of the load testing capabilities. But in terms of going back through and monitoring what's been running on there and getting the nice history of it all, that would be great to have. For now, best to use what we have in IVConsole for the performance monitoring. But yeah, if that's something you need, specifically, feel free to drop me a message in an email over saying, hey, look, this is what I really, really need. And, if we had this in DBArtisan, we'd be looking to buy X number of licenses. I can take that to the sales guys and they can push that back through to the product management on the Artisan side. And yeah, absolutely, always love to hear what you're after, specifically around the InterBase side.
So now IVConsole, is that a separate installation or is it part of the regular InterBase install?
So IVConsole's part of InterBase. As you install, if you just go and have a look it'd be in the program menu options. you'll be able to go find it there.
Now, when you're installing InterBase, doesn't it give you an option to choose if you're installing a server or just client? If you're doing the full.
It does, yeah, and yeah.
And
I can't remember if IVConsole is included in the client install, but it's certainly, yeah, it's definitely installed in the server install.
Okay. So I'm just wondering maybe if they did the wrong part.
I'm just having a look, see if I can find the path for it. So as we're chatting, but carry on.
Are the blobs stored internally in the database, or are they stored separately?
Blobs are stored inside the database. So we have a database type called a blob. When you define the blob, you can see actually through IVConsole when you go create them, you can define if it's an unknown blob, if it's a text blob. There's a few different types that you can define. And then that helps give additional information to the tool. So, for example, FireDAC picks up if it's a text blob. It will then link that up to a memory control on the screen quite happily, that kind of stuff. If it's an unknown type of blob, then you might need to say, right, I need to take what I put in there. I've used them in the past for storing images, for using, just assigning T strings into doing a whole load of different things. So really up to you what you can go and put in those.
Okay. This is a FireDAC related question. Is it possible to use local SQL to update different databases? I believe it is, if you're not sure on FireDAC.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you actually have the different data sets and they belong to the different data sources that they've come from.
Yep.
So as long as you've got, I think you can turn cached updates on, you can go make some changes and commit those changes through. And, actually then, if you've got request live or something on them, it'll then just push those straight back down. So, that's certainly doable. And that doesn't matter if you're then doing a query that's looking at the two different data sets. You can then go ahead and update the one that's the source part.
How do you get the ID of the last record inserted?
So say that again. How do you get the
ID of the last record that you inserted?
Yeah, we don't have an auto increment field. If you want to get the last record, then I just do select star from table and then just go dataset.last and you'll pick up the last record there. If you do select star from table without any index on it, it will give you the records in the order they're in the actual table. However they've been inserted, then a select star from table will get you the data as it is in the order it's been put into the actual table.
Do you need to have an enterprise or higher edition of Delphi to connect to InterBase?
So Professional Edition and above will connect to InterBase. The Professional Edition definitely covers you for local connections. And in fact, I think the IBX components, if you actually have a look at the datasheet, may actually, in theory, allow you for connection across the network to them. To a remote database as well for InterBase only. But Pro plus FireDAC Pack will certainly give you full access across the network. That would be the cheapest way to get enterprise connectivity. If you're just using the embedded version, the deeply embedded version, i.e. to Go and IB Lite, then the Pro Edition is basically what you need.
Okay, excellent. What is the limit data free edition?
So IB Lite is basically, it's binary compatible with InterBase to Go. The only difference actually at deploy time, if you actually want to move from the free edition to a paid edition, is to replace the license file. So you can actually do that with a remote call to get license from your server. download the license file, replace it on disk, and relaunch your application. It will then be licensed as a to-go edition. And then you can go ahead and encrypt the database, and you can enable change views to work and that kind of stuff. So if you want to do a free version, and then if people want to upgrade to the pro version of your application, at that point you then go fetch the license file and put it in the right place, and it will automatically license it for you. You can do that. The free edition is 100 megs on disk space. It's one thread to the database engine, and it doesn't have encryption, and it doesn't have change views. But apart from that, it's got the full core engine that To-Go has.
Okay. So apparently Alf's saying that he's talked to DBArtisan, and they say that he needs to talk to you. So.
Okay, well, just send me an email over Alf and tell me the requirements and how much you need. And basically, like any of these things, it's a business case for the product team to take on. I'd love them to have deeper integration with InterBase. In terms of what their tools can offer. But the reality is to develop things costs time and money. And if we've got people asking for it, we've got a case to go and do it. So the more people that ask for it, the bigger chance we have of getting it done. So please do send me something over with specifically what you're after, and we can carry that conversation on.
So here's a question about the FireDAX merge dataset function. If you can elaborate on how that works.
So the FireDAC, probably best thing to do, go and have a look at skill sprints. If you've not been on the skill sprints, I'd highly recommend them. Some funny fellow runs them now. I can't remember what his name is. Oh yeah, Jim McKeith. There we are. But no, so yeah, the skill sprints are 20 minutes. I think Jens Fudge did a really, really good session. I think it was Jens, wasn't it, on the FireDAC components and the actual merge data set stuff. The local SQL. That's great to go and have a look at. I did one on the I'll actually have a look at it in the follow-on section on change views for a couple of minutes partway through. But there's stuff on the skill sprints about it as well. Basically, the merge data set, what it does is you have the local data set dots merge data set, and then you have the data set that's got the data that you want to merge in, i.e. that's got the delta, and then you tell it the type of merge that you want to do, i.e. merge the entire data set in, merge just the deltas in. There's a few different options. And there's also an option to tell it to update the metadata as well, which is kind of useful for in-memory work. The merge data set is just a really nice simple call that you can make. And what it'll do is it'll then actually, rather than you having a look at what's been deleted, inserted, or updated, it will just go ahead and do those onto that data set for you. So then locally, your data set then has got that merged in, and you can then use the change log in the data set to review what's being done remotely and show that to the end user, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. I'm a big fan of the skill sprints as well. I like the nice short to the point videos. So here's a question. If you're using DataSnap or I'm using InterBase on a DataSnap server so that have multiple clients connecting through DataSnap to InterBase, how does licensing work? Do you have to have a separate license for each individual client connecting to DataSnap, or do you only need the one user license for the DataSnap server to the InterBase?
Okay, it's a slightly complicated question, but in essence, if you're named users, then you can have a license for every named user who's going to be able to connect in. If you're doing direct connections, then it's works concurrent connections. If you're running under a web server, which DataSnap in essence would be running under a web server, then we do have an unlimited license. And I think the breakpoint is around about 84, 85 licenses, where it's actually cheaper to buy unlimited than the individual named user licenses that you need. So you just put an unlimited license against the server, and then off you go.
Okay. Oh my, we're having so much fun. It's already after 6. Let's go ahead and get started with the next session here. Thank you so much, Stephen, for this.
no problem. And obviously I'll be around for Q&A after the following session as well.
Yeah, so if you didn't get your question answered now, go ahead and get it ready for Stephen. He'll get them answered at the end of this next session on InterBase change views, deep dive, deliver insanely efficient data updates.